We'll shift gears to a much different type of playing surface, from the ice to the hardwood, with Philip Rossman-Reich from OrlandoMagicDaily.com.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing very well, bud. Good to chat with you again here. It's been a little while. How'd your summer go?
Summer went well. Keeping busy, finding stuff to do, just waiting for basketball season to start, and now we're in the grind, so to speak.
Well, and not a bad start to the basketball season here for your Orlando Magic. We'll chat about that a little bit later in the segment here, but let's take an overall look here at the Eastern Conference to start things off, Philip, because with LeBron James out of the picture, it's pretty wide open at this point in time. And the top 5 teams, Raptors, Bucks, Sixers, Pacers, and the Boston Celtics, all within 4 games there of the top spot, within 4 games of each other from a standing standpoint. Boston has won 6 in a row, so we'll touch on them a little bit more in a second. But how do you sort of expect this thing to shake out? I mean, everyone's played 27, 28 games now to this point. What do you think? I mean, who is your front runner right now in the East?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the cream is starting to rise to the top here in the Eastern Conference. But I think Toronto's been the clear favorite. They've been the most consistent team out of all those top teams. Boston's kind of coming on a little bit lately. But the Raptors have been, essentially the same reliable, dominant Raptors team that they have been for the last few years, even with a new coach, even with Kawhi Leonard instead of DeMar DeRozan. And of course, there's still the potential for them to continue to get better. This is just a Raptors team that scores at a really high rate and defends really, really well, just like they did last year. I mean, I think the questions will remain about Toronto, whether they can perform in the playoffs, which has been their problem for so long. And of course, Kawhi Leonard has to stay healthy after missing almost all of last season. But the Raptors have clearly kind of proved themselves as the class of the Eastern Conference at the moment.
Well, and when you look at the home-road splits here in the Eastern Conference, this is one that really stands out to me, and something that I think helps Toronto long-term. I mean, obviously it's a fairly small sample size here, but 10-3 on the road, the only team in the NBA with 10 road wins here so far. Why are they so good on the road?
I mean, I think it's just more than a lot of the other elite than most of the other elite teams, they haven't had a lot of disruption. Outside of bringing in Kawhi Leonard, it's still virtually the same roster as last year. I mean, even Nick Nurse was an assistant coach with them. So they have a new coach, but they don't really have a new coach, it feels like. So, when you're going out on the road, when you don't have the comforts of home, when you don't, when you have adversity going against you, having a comfort factor matters. I mean, if you can just feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more in sync with everyone else, you're going to play a little bit better. And Toronto, I think, certainly take advantage of that early in the season to kind of race ahead of the rest of the pack.
The Milwaukee Bucks here got off to a very, very nice start, leveled off a little bit, but now they're kind of picking it back up some. Couple straight wins here for them. 16 home games against 10 road games so far, 13-3 at home, just 5-5 on the road. But Philip, the Bucks made a trade earlier this week with the Cavaliers. Is that something that helps them long term?
I think that deal was done more to clear up some cap room for the future. I mean, I think Milwaukee knows that their time to strike is coming very soon. I mean, Giannis Antetokounmpo is entering his prime, is playing a lot of really good stuff, working with Mike Budenholzer as their head coach. They're really taking some major steps forward. But I think they also know that they got to be able to plan for their future. And so I felt like that deal that they made was as much about planning for the future and kind of keep not destroying anything they have now. I don't think they gave up a whole lot, but they didn't really bring in a whole lot in either. So they're definitely looking to try and get the team better in the short term. But I think that deal was more about clearing some room for the long term so they can add pieces and hopefully take another step in the next few years.
The Sixers, they're tied for second right now with the Bucks, although they have played 2 more games than Milwaukee has. Philadelphia 14-1 at home, just 5-8 away from home. Is this because they've kind of picked and choose their spots with Joel Embiid? What do you think it is for the Sixers, why they have such a big home road dichotomy here?
I mean, I think you see that with a lot of young teams. And while they do have Jimmy Butler and they have had some playoff success, really just 1 year playoff success, this is still a really young team. And not only that, this is a team that is still figuring out its rotation, and it doesn't have the same level of depth that they had last year. I mean, I think a really underrated move that Philadelphia did, or a move that's had a kind of an underrated impact, was their loss of Ersan Ilyasova. That he was a glue guy for that team. He did all the kind of little dirty things that a winning team needs someone to do, and did it without complaint, did it without needing a lot of shots, and I think they really missed that presence. They're relying still on a lot of young guys, a lot of guys who have been through the ringer once, but haven't been through it so many times. And I think a little bit of a step back was a little bit expected. Then you add in Jimmy Butler, who has really changed a lot of what Philadelphia has done. You're hearing that Joel Embiid isn't happy with his touches or wants to do more with the touches that he's getting. It doesn't seem like he's disrupting anything or complaining too much. He's more upset at himself. But in any case, he's not happy with how he's playing and the role that he's playing. You still got a team that's figuring a lot of things out. And so you add a team that doesn't have the same quality of depth that they had last year, especially on the road, you're going to see them struggle a little bit.
So the Indiana Pacers here, Victor Oladipo missing his 11th straight game, and they've won 4 in a row. They're in 4th place, so right now they're above the cutoff for home court in the first round. You really have to be encouraged with what the Pacers are doing without Oladipo here. What do they look like when he comes back? I mean, is this a top 3, top 4 caliber team?
It certainly feels that way. It certainly feels that they could be in that top group. I mean, I would still put Toronto, Boston, and Philadelphia ahead of them. I probably still leave Milwaukee ahead of them. So Indiana's got its work cut out for it to get home court advantage. It's certainly a long, long season. And the Pacers have had a lot of role players play really, really well. The big difference, though, for Indiana so far this year has been Miles Turner. Last year, Turner did not live up to the promise of his rookie year for sure. It's been kind of 2 years where he's really struggled in a lot of ways. But he has really emerged this year as a really strong defender and paint protector. And that changes a lot of what Indiana can do defensively. And their defense is the reason why they're still winning games without Victor Oladipo, because they don't have all the offensive weapons, obviously, that Oladipo can provide. Tyreek Evans has struggled a little bit for them, but Bojan Bogdanovic has been good. Miles Turner, again, has started scoring a little bit more. They're getting some good contributions off the bench. You just got a lot of – it's sort of like the L.A. Clippers out west. They have a lot of guys who are just good basketball players. They're not going to blow you away with talent. They got the one elite guy maybe in Victor Oladipo, but they're not going to blow you away with their talent. They're just going to constantly send waves of good players at you, so you've got to be on your toes and playing at a high level at all points of the game. There's no break, and that's really, I think, what's helped buoy Indiana's success while Oladipo's been out. They just have a lot of really good players who are playing very, very well right now.
Well, and as you look at the Eastern Conference futures odds here, Toronto plus 185 to win the conference and go to the finals. Boston plus 205, Milwaukee plus 520, Philadelphia plus 535, and then Indiana is next at plus 3250. So more than a 30-1 shot here to win the Eastern Conference. So it does seem like the odds maker is certainly in line with you that the Pacers probably just don't have the horses right now to be a legitimate contender here in the Eastern Conference. So let's talk about the Boston Celtics. 6 in a row for them. They go from 10-10 to 16-10. The optics of that look a whole hell of a lot different than a 500 record. Have they figured it out? Has Brad Stevens cracked the code of this team, or are there still some problems here?
I think it was always with Boston a little bit of them figuring it out. They have been so good and so resilient when they're facing injuries that they're adding in a lot of talented players who are used to playing a very specific way, and it takes a little adjustment to get there. I mean, Kyrie Irving, very ball dominant. While he can move the ball and works the spot-up game, he wants his ISOs. He's going to slow the game down a little bit and try and break guys down off the dribble. Gordon Hayward, coming back from injury, I think they to some extent rushed him back a little bit too quickly and putting him in the starting lineup and kind of playing him with the starting group rather than maybe slowly bringing him into their fold and letting some of the other guys who really helped them last year kind of take over those minutes and then slowly ramping up Hayward as he gets better and improves. I think they finally found that sweet spot with all of those guys offensively, because their defense has been good all year long. They've been probably the top team in the league in defensive rating for most of the season. I think they're still, if they're not the top team, they're still in the top 5 pretty easily. They just couldn't score. Their offense just couldn't figure itself out. And so now we're starting, I think, to see Boston get into a rhythm offensively, figure out the roles that their various guys need to play, and continue to grow from there. And that's obviously a big sign for the Celtics. I don't think there's ever a ton of panic about them. I don't believe that anyone really thought, oh, Boston's in trouble. They're 10-10. I mean, I think there was some talk about that, but this is a veteran group. Brad Stevens has been around this team for a while. You know, they know it's a marathon. They were waiting for a moment like this to kind of take control of their record, and they're probably in it for the long haul because when you have a defense as good as Boston, you're going to have a chance to win a lot of games.
So if you had to look at it now, and Boston's played 26 games, Toronto's played 28, is that your Eastern Conference final? I mean, would you be surprised to see any other matchup?
I would not be surprised if that's the Eastern Conference final. I'd give Philadelphia a puncher's chance to get in there. You know, I think Philadelphia is a team that's built a little bit more for the playoffs than maybe Boston is to some extent. Because in the playoff, you know, in the regular season, depth matters a lot. You're not going to be able to play all your players 82 games, 35 minutes a game. That's just not going to happen. In the playoffs, you start to see those rotations get shorter. Depth starts to matter a little bit less. You know, you need your role players to step up in big moments, but you know, you don't need to go 10 guys deep. You don't need to go 9 guys deep in the playoffs. And I think that's where Philadelphia might have a little bit of an advantage over Boston. Now, Boston has kind of had Philadelphia's number a little bit for the past few years, so I'd still bet Boston over Philadelphia. But the advantages that Boston has and has displayed over the last few years, I think some of those go away as you get a little bit deeper into the playoffs, and it just becomes about, you know, can your best players beat the other team's best players?
So as people notice here, we've got teams from the Atlantic and teams from the Central all in the top 6. The first team from the Southeast Division, the Charlotte Hornets, who are 13-13, and if the season ended today, and I'm sure you wish it did, Philip, the Orlando Magic would make it into the playoffs as the 8th seed here. They have dropped 3 in a row, though, to go from 12-12 to 12-15. So, I mean, someone from the Southeast is going to have to make the playoffs, probably 2 someones, given where the Nets, Knicks, and the rest of the conference is. So who are those teams going to be from the East? I mean, you know, the Wizards have a ton of issues. Miami, you know, we'll see if they can get things squared away, but they're only 5-12 against the East here so far. Who winds up winning this division, and who may be the 8th seed?
Yeah, the Southeast Division it's going to be interesting, but probably for a lot of the wrong reasons. It's a little bit of a race to the bottom. You know, those 4 teams that you mentioned, Miami, Washington, Charlotte, Orlando, are all bunched up from 7 to, I think, 10 in the standings, or 7 to 11 in the standings. So if you're looking for classic NBA divisional battles that used to matter but don't matter so much anymore, this division is going to be a war for a lot of the season. You know, I don't think Charlotte's going to be much better than 500. They're certainly looking like the best team of the bunch. They've probably got the best, or at least the second best player in the division in Kemba Walker. I think Washington is going to make a run too and make a push. Although they have a lot of internal problems, that is still a really talented team. Bradley Beal, just won Eastern Conference Player of the Week, is playing fantastic, playing at an all-star level. And John Wall, of course, is sitting there too, who's a very, very good player as well. Orlando has been a bit of a surprise this year, even at 12-15. They're playing at they have been playing at a very high level. They've been competing a lot harder, and you know, there's certainly a belief here in Orlando that this is a group that can break through and be in the playoff conversation, if not make the playoffs outright. And, you know, you never count out Miami. As much as Miami has struggled this year, and like you said, has a poor Eastern Conference record, it feels like they're on shakier ground than usual. That team always finds a way to stay in the conversation. So you've got Fort, and no offense to Atlanta, Atlanta's kind of rebuilding. It's really the only team that's outright rebuilding at this point, not really in the playoff conversation. But you've got those 4 teams in this division. They're going to be battling for those last 2 playoff spots. Obviously, one of them has to get in. Is guaranteed at least the 8th seed. But it's going to be a battle between those 4 teams. They all have flaws. They all have reasons why they can be successful. But it's going to be a really hard battle for all 4. They're going to go through their ups and downs. There's going to be a lot of shifting at the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings, and someone's going to end up getting those spots. And it's maybe the team that gets hot in April.
Now, you look at Orlando here on the season, 15-12 against the spread, but 17-10 to the under. So based on what I'm looking at here, Philip, and maybe you can confirm this as somebody who follows the team religiously, 17-10 to the under. Looks like they've committed to playing defense, and they're actually following through with it.
Yeah, they're playing defense a lot better than they have in the past. They're still a middling defense. There's still definitely a lot they can do. But Steve Clifford with Charlotte was known for his defense. That's what he got the Hornets to do, the Bobcats and then the Hornets to do, and that really helped turn that whole franchise around and got them into playoff contention and into more serious playoff conversations every single year, even if they didn't meet that benchmark every year. Defense has been a big thing for Orlando. It's the reason why they're more competitive than they usually are. But really, what I think is more interesting is the Magic's offense. When it's been good, has been really, really good. Before this 3-game losing streak, the Magic, from November 2nd or November 4th through a few weeks ago, had one of the top 10 offenses in the league, which you wouldn't think with the kind of weapons that they have. Nikola Vucevic was putting up near triple doubles on a nearly nightly basis for a little while there. They have a really dynamic offense when they execute it well. The problem is they don't always execute it well, and a part of the reason why I think the Magic have hit the under a few times is they've laid a few duds. Last night, particularly against the Dallas Mavericks, they lost 101-76, so it's their lowest offensive output of the season. Before that, they played the Indiana Pacers and scored only 90. So this is kind of a hot and cold offense. When they're really hot, they're really good. When they're really cold, they're really bad. And their defense is good enough to keep them in games when the offense is working, but it's not good enough to keep them in games on its own. And I think that's one of the big issues that the Magic have to figure out now as they get into the meat of their season.
Well, we'll shift over to the Western Conference here. Game 531, 532 tonight is Portland taking on Houston. Portland, pretty decent team. They've had a couple of bumps in the road here over the last couple of weeks. The Rockets are 11-14. They're 14th in the Western Conference right now, and yet they're a 6.5-point favorite. So obviously what's happening here in the betting market is that you have to respect the talent level of Houston, but they're just not playing up to that capability right now. Philip, what is wrong with the Houston Rockets?
The big thing with Houston, it's not their offense. While Chris Paul and James Harden aren't playing at the same level that they were playing at last year, that is still a really potent and dangerous offensive team. What's different about this year is their defense has fallen completely off a cliff. The reason why the Rockets had the best record in the league last season, were inches away from the NBA Finals and beating the Golden State Warriors, was their defense was one of the very best defenses in the entire league. That's how they generated a lot of their offense. That's how they got out in transition. That's how they created a lot of the mismatches that made James Harden MVP. They weren't isolating. They weren't having to execute in the half court. They were able to flow freely into that Mike D'Antoni offense. When you don't get stops, you have to start against set defenses and run your half court stuff, and that's never going to be as efficient as getting out in transition and doing secondary transition breaks. Houston losing Trevor Ariza, losing Luka Mbamute were huge blows to this team. I don't think people gave them the credit that maybe they deserve for Houston's success. But trading them in for Carmelo Anthony and James Ennis is a huge step down. And obviously Carmelo Anthony is not really playing for them anymore, although I think he's still on the roster. It may have bolstered their offense and may have looked good to add to an already potent offense, but the difference between Houston teams that have competed for the championship, whether it was in the Dwight Howard era or the Chris Paul era, and the teams that struggle to meet those expectations has always been the team's defense. And that's always been a problem in D'Antoni's time in Houston, is when they are unable to play defense, they're a middle-of-the-road West team. And unfortunately in the West, middle of the road puts you at 14th in the West because it's so competitive out there. If Houston can figure out their defense, they'll have a chance. They'll be a good team again. But, they're obviously not going to be on that breakneck they were on last year. And I think most people are kind of counting them out and writing them off as far as challenging the Warriors again this year.
Well, the Warriors right now, and I'm pulling this from 5 Dimes, minus 260 to win the West implies about a little more than 72% chance that they win it. I think it's higher than that personally. The Lakers are second at plus 1150. The Rockets, despite all the problems, still third in the odds, plus 1275. So that's the question here, Philip. With the personnel that they have, can they fix this thing, or do they need to be really active on the trade market, before the playoffs roll around?
I think they can fix this thing. They've obviously got the talent. And as much as James Harden and Chris Paul have struggled Clint Capella is still playing really, really good. And they've got the pieces still to play defense, maybe not at the level that they had last year, but certainly to continue playing defense. What I'm more worried about with Houston is that their response will be to double down on offense. It'll be to double down on adding more scores. I think I've heard them, be in the running for some of the offensive players that are going to hit the trade market. What Houston really needs is to find two-way players and to find defenders, to find gritty defenders who, can hit an open three, but are in there more to muck the game up a little bit and make life harder for opposing wings and opposing players. And that's tougher to find on the trade market because those guys are so valuable. If Houston goes to the trade market looking to add offense, I think they'll still be in trouble. I don't think they'll solve very much. If they go into the trade market looking actively for perimeter defending and wing defense, they'll be in better shape. Maybe when Brandon Knight comes back, he can provide a little bit of that. They still have him on the shelf waiting to come back from injury. But it still feels like Houston has to find defense. They have to find perimeter defense if they want to win, if they want to get back to their elite level. And just frankly, they're not there yet.
Now, one of the teams that you touched on a little bit earlier, team that the Magic just played, Dallas Mavericks. They are 14-11 here, and I think that what Dallas is doing this season, and really what they've done over the last 10 games, winning 7 of 10, I think it sort of underscores here, what one really special player can mean in the NBA, and Dallas certainly has that now in Luka Doncic. So is this a sustainable team? I mean, can they actually be somebody that crashes this playoff party, or are they just kind of riding the wave right now?
I will never doubt Rick Carlisle. I think a lot of the credit should go to him in figuring out how to get the most out of this team, especially on the defensive end. They had their issues very early on in the season. They looked like one of the worst teams in the league, as everyone projected early on in the season. And then they kind of hit a groove. Luka Doncic figured things out a lot quicker in the NBA than I think a lot of people thought. Harrison Barnes has been fairly consistent all year. DeAndre Jordan, began accepting his role and playing a lot better, especially on the defensive end. They're just I was looking at their stat profile getting ready for the game last night, and they're just a kind of delightfully average team. I think they're 15th in offensive rating, 13th in defensive rating. That's going to leave them in a lot of games. They're going to compete. They're going to be there, and that's what you expect from a Rick Carlisle coach team. I mean, I think Carlisle for a long time has been one of the top at least 10, if not 5 coaches in the league. He just always seems to get the most out of his team. The big thing with Dallas is while they do have a nice bench and they have a lot of young, energetic guys providing a lot of depth, if their big players aren't playing well, and that includes Doncic, they're going to struggle a little bit, especially in that West. So it wouldn't surprise me if they fade a little bit. They're a young team. Doncic has played a professional season before, but not anything really like this. So he's going through a nice stretch now, and yeah, he'll win Rookie of the Year. I'm not taking anything away from him, but it's a long season. Every rookie hits the wall at some point. I think Luka will certainly hit the wall at some point, and kind of his play will dip up and down for a little bit, which you expect from rookies. I was the guy who was telling everyone I don't get why the Suns weren't taking him number one. He was my clear number one pick during the draft process. You just don't see guys dominate professionals at his age the way that he did and still get better, and I think he's proven that in the NBA so far. But this is a team that I think still pretty, still has some young guys and still has a lot of young guys they're relying on. So I think they'll go through some ups and downs. Right now they're going through a big upswing, so ride it while you can, and then we'll see how they recover when they do eventually hit some adversity and hit some struggles.
Dallas' season win total 34.5 coming into the year, already 14 wins for them. And to wrap this thing up, Philip, I want to talk about a couple of teams that were in a similar bucket coming into the season. That would be the Los Angeles Clippers, whose season win total opened 35.5 at the Westgate in Las Vegas, closed 37.5. And the Memphis Grizzlies, who opened 34.5, closed 33.5 out there. Both of those teams right now above the cut line for the playoffs, both of them playing very well. The Clippers in particular, are these two teams that are in it for the long haul now? Are they going to overachieve what some of their preseason projections were?
I think both will overachieve their preseason projections just because, especially with Memphis. The reason why Memphis was in the lottery last year was simply because Mike Conley and Marc Gasol were hurt. They're two best players. And a lot of what Memphis does relies on them. They need both of them playing if they want to compete. And when they are, they're definitely a borderline playoff team. You can't ignore them. It's just a matter of whether they can stay healthy or not. and obviously they've been really healthy. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been a real big boost as a rookie. So, they definitely have a lot working for them, and they're playing very, very well right now. I don't think they'll last as much as the Clippers will. Kind of like I said with one of the earlier teams we talked about, the Clippers just have a lot. Let's talk about the Pacers. The Clippers just have a lot of really good players, and not only that, they had Tobias Harris take another step up in his game, where he's looking like an all-star this year, and averaging close to 30, scoring close to 30 points on the regular. But they do a really good job sharing and moving the ball. They have a lot of depth. Their bench is very, very strong. So they'll be able to withstand some injuries and withstand some problems here. Do they have that one guy that's going to take over a game late? No, but that's not who they are. They're very sharing the ball type of team. They move the ball particularly well. Again, they have depth that they can keep coming at you in waves, and so they'll have a chance to win a lot of games. I don't know if the Clippers are going to be one of the top seeds in the West like they are now, but they absolutely should feel like they are a playoff team with the way that they played so far this season, and that should be a goal of theirs this year.
Philip Rossman-Reich from OrlandoMagicDaily.com. What do you guys got going on over there right now, man?
We are getting set for the Magic's trip to Mexico City, but we're in the midst of the playoff race and all the philosophical questions that brings up. A lot of fans have been scarred over the last 6 years here. I don't know if you've heard that they've been pretty bad. And so everyone's trying to measure what the success is so far this year and whether this is sustainable for the Magic. So, we're keeping a close eye on the team on that front, keeping a close eye on the standings. And, of course, as I'm sure you know, the trade market really opens up on Saturday. And so rumor season is getting set to begin in the NBA, and I'm sure the Magic will be very involved in a lot of rumors with a couple of expiring contracts that teams might be interested in as the season moves on.
Well, I definitely encourage everyone to follow Philip on Twitter as well. Reich, OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Good to get you back on the program here, buddy. Good to chat some NBA with you. Hopefully we'll do it again real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you need me, just give me a call.